Hello. Welcome to the Seeker's Reset. Give me a moment. I have left open my father's closet. If you watch this channel at all, you know that I'm Robert, and this is the room that I grew up in, which is currently used by my father and my nephew periodically. He's not here all the time. And I am at home at 42 years old, undergoing the humbling of my own reset at the moment. And I try to be as open about these things as possible, because I know that if you are interested in my content, you're probably going through something very similar. So there's really nothing to hide anyway. And it all begins potentially with what the subject of this episode is, which I am calling the detour, the shadow of heaven. And I told you in the last couple of episodes that I would want to talk a bit about heaven. We talked a lot about hell, purgatory. I want to talk a little bit about heaven, and also this notion of something I'm calling the detour. The detour really isn't a detour. Just like we could say about in life, everything ultimately serves a purpose. Everything we do ultimately fits into the story of our lives and ultimately is a link in the chain of cause and effect. But the term detour simply expresses the idea that you can go to things the direct way, or you can go more indirect ways. And if I could summarize the two, the direct way generally will be the path of more intense, acute pain and suffering, versus the indirect way would be the path of more chronic pain and suffering. And I, for one, have been mostly on the indirect path. And that's because I've taken detours. The detours are moments when we have the opportunity to sort of fast track ourselves, but we choose to favor comforts and addictions and our own vision of things over what is more divinely orchestrated or intended. And so the detour, of course, is in relationship with going from the state of hell, or at least at a minimum, the state of imperfection and sinfulness and karma, to the state of being in heaven, within and without. So I'm not an expert on heaven at all. And that's why I will speak less about that in general. And the only person that I've found who appears to have a grasp of heaven is the man who claims to be Jesus, who preaches divine truth. And I refer to that as a basis for most of my content so far. I have yet to give a clearer explanation of what I perceive as how I perceive divine truth and how and my relationship with it, which is not, it's not I have not completely become a believer in every aspect of it at all, but it is as a system of beliefs and principles and an understanding of what is at the center and the core of human existence. It is the only thing that has really made sense to me. Although I sense that something is lacking, but I have yet to elaborate on that publicly, and I will soon. I may be wrong, by the way, maybe very wrong, but I will do that soon. But in the interim, like I said, you can look to Divine Truth, divinetruth.com, and the Divine Truth YouTube channel to get an understanding of what heaven is all about. And heaven, from their perspective, is the state of being at one with God, which is a state of human perfection, and you could call it an angelic condition, and at oneness with God, where fear is no longer there. That's one of the main qualities of heaven. No more fear. It is all love and all truth, because you are now connected directly, like a part of God, essentially, which is a destiny we could all have if we chose. This is all me paraphrasing Divine Truth. Now, when I speak of heaven, and when I speak of it similarly, but I'm going to say that it is also more about just becoming what we are capable of being, right? What our soul's blueprint is. And that could be different on Earth from what it might be after life on Earth. I don't know. I'm unqualified. In fact, that's the area where I struggle the most to really understand even what Divine Truth is offering and suggesting. But in my life, the way that detours have manifested have been in running after things that I thought I wanted, which ultimately wound up being sources of my undoing. And so in a strange kind of, if you think of it as still an aspect of a loving God's universe where love still reigns, then the detour is kind of like God presenting you with everything you think you want, and you getting it, and then discovering it's not what you actually wanted. And then you go into this struggle with yourself between your soul, and you could call it your ego, your facade, your false self. And the struggle is like, but who am I really? Am I the one who wanted this? Or am I something else altogether that I don't even know what that is? And I think that the detour presents this. The detour is, I know that if I keep going forward, I'm going to have to experience a lot of pain. Meaning purging. The purgatory process begins, right? The purging process begins. And it becomes much more intense, more quickly, more accelerated. So instead of that, I take a detour. And as you get more and more conscious, you will probably sense when you're taking a detour. You'll probably even think it. You may even use the word, and you might think, well, that's okay. And it is okay, because we have free will, and ultimately we can always get back, so I believe, to the path of becoming who we are and what we are here to do. But the detour will take you off that. But the benefit of the detour, if you are awake to it, is that you can use it to understand whatever it is that prevents you from going more directly toward your soul, toward the cleaning of your soul, the releasing of the sin, the karma, and the healing of the wounds, all of which are interrupting our ability to do and be what we're here for, and what will bring us real joy, the truest form of joy and the truest form of love. It could take the form of a business opportunity. It could take the form of some accomplishment that has caught your eye, that you feel you must achieve. It could take the form of a relationship. It could take the form of some vision that you're just overtaken by. It could take the form of some position of influence, one way or another. But it's likely going to be something very substantial that like completely absorbs you. It's a movement into this container where you're sort of protecting yourself from the feeling, the magnetic pull towards going through the purgatory process, the pain, the release of the pain, the feeling of the pain, the acceptance and the processing of all the things that we have not wanted to do. So I experienced this multiple times in my life. I remember several times in my life. There was a business moment. There were multiple relationships. There was the achievement, particularly in my academic career in high school and college, like this drive to be at the top. Um, the feeling like, well, when I get to that, then I will handle the rest. When I complete this task, then I'll handle the other things. And the underlying feeling is the hope that actually the thing won't have to be done, or it won't have to be done the way that you think it will have to be done. In 2020 and 2021, I experienced almost all of this at once. So it was like everything I wanted was coming to me and it felt amazing. And then it all collapsed. So I've called this episode The Detour and the Shadow of Heaven. What I mean by the shadow of heaven is that it's like platonic. The shadows on the wall of Plato's cave versus the actual things that are projecting the shadow. The true forms, as he called them, forms, I believe. When we get distracted, quote unquote, by the detour, and we want to go off in pursuit of it because something feels so energizing, so enlivening about it, we're experiencing a shadow of what's actually possible. So heaven, it's a shadow of heaven. Whatever that experience is promising, it's a shadow of the real experience of heaven. So one of the things if you've gone through this kind of detour before and been shocked, because a lot of what I experienced afterward was simply this feeling of betrayal by the universe. I was like, how could everything seem so perfect and then be completely destroyed? So I felt betrayed. I felt like I no longer understood life. I no longer felt connected to what I thought was God. I no longer felt cared for and protected in the universe. I felt like I had been lost completely, damned, abandoned. So it brings you to your knees, right? We talk about the rock bottom moment a lot on this channel. It brings the seeker to his knees, to her knees. And then it's a question of how to proceed from there. So the detour has the effect of showing you this shadow of heaven, some feeling that you've never had before, right? Like a drug would, right? A drug gives you euphoria, it gives you a high. The meeting of an addiction gives you euphoria, it gives you a high. It gives you the sense of something wonderful. It feels like it's something better than what you're used to, way better in some instances. So we get that feeling. And then you go through the crash and the hangover. And so the detour does that. And in the process, it exposes, so this is so that you don't go on too many detours, it exposes all of the places that you are not more directly addressing. So for me, some of those places were my own livelihood and my relationship with money and my dependency on women and my false faith in things, that I would talk a lot about how the universe would help me and how God would help me and how things will work out if I follow my dreams, but I didn't do it. If I followed my desires and dreams, but I didn't actually do it. And even now I'm learning how to do these things. I'm still working my way through all of those, and each one of them could deserve its own show, its own presentation, discussion. Sex was another big one. So like sex, that came up big. Like my wounding sexually, I had no idea how deep it ran until my most recent relationship. I thought I was actually already healing a lot of it, and I was so far off in how deep that wounding was. Same thing with the other things that I mentioned. I thought I had made a lot of progress on those things. But I was also praying to heal things at the root. I was praying to get to the heart and the core of what was stopping me from healing and becoming what I know I'm capable of being. So in some respects, a detour is the detour away from a more direct route. And in other ways, it's actually the living through of the experiences required to deal with the underlying stuff. So let me say, sort of as a parenthesis here, I'm calling this a detour, but in reality, it could very well be exactly what one needs. It's just not the straight path from hell to heaven. It's the going through of purgatory. And if I had known that personally in 2020 and 2021, I would have handled my relationship, my ambitions, my aspirations, the visions that I had, my friendships, my family, money. I would have handled it all very differently. I would have not expected everything to be perfect right away. I would have known that everything needed to be processed. And if I was choosing this particular path, this particular relationship, this particular location, this particular, even the things I was doing on a day-to-day basis, the things that I was creating, building, learning, if I had had this awareness, then I could have gone through all of that with a very different approach, where I was not demanding of myself and others that we be in heaven right away, because there was so much to process and I was not aware of it. So it became what I'm calling a detour. But now I'm thinking that the word might be a bit wrong, insofar as it's really like it is it's the massive experience. And the question is whether you can engage with it and the people in your life in a way where you can get through it and learn and not develop all sorts of new codependencies along the way. It's actually breaking all those codependencies in the process, but not necessarily ending the relationships. And that was a new concept to me, of like how to break codependencies without necessarily ending relationships. I didn't have the wherewithal for that before, because I didn't understand this you have to go through purgatory to get to heaven. And in the process, what I'm beginning to realize now, is that that's precisely what begins to develop compassion and real love, is that you realize that you actually have to go through life. You have to live life. You cannot isolate yourself away for this completely. You must take action within the world to go through this process. It has to be that way. Now, you can position yourself so that you're not in the world all the time. That's fine. And I think that that's wise for most of us. But you cannot go through this process without being fully immersed in the world to do these things. So now I'm backtracking a lot. I've called this the detour. I might even change the title of the video. And in fact, it's a beautiful thing, because I've labeled it the detour. So it became its own detour. I just discovered more of what I'm trying to say by thinking I was going to talk about the detour, and now I'm sharing that it's not really a detour. It just feels like that if you don't harvest the lessons of it. It just feels like you could think, oh my gosh, I've wasted my time, I've wasted my money, I've wasted my life on these things that I thought would work out another way, unless you understand that if they didn't work out the way that you anticipated, then they are ripe, brimming with lessons and triggers to get the emotional body and the spiritual body to bring up all this emotion, all these feelings, all these beliefs, so that they can be processed, purified, released, etc. It's actually, in the end, it winds up being a really beautiful process, I'm sure, but I'm not far enough through it to say that I can vouch for that completely. because I still suffer very much from day to day, and I harbor many regrets and many grudges still towards people and things in my past. And I know that that's not good for me or anyone, but I'm going through the process. So you get the shadow and the glimpse of heaven, which draws you. It creates your desire, right? And you creates your sense of where you want to go, what you want to try, what you want to do. And in all likelihood, if you're following a path as I have followed, sometimes those things are going to be massive experiences that touch every part of your life. It could be a marriage. It could be a traumatic experience that you don't expect. It could be a bankruptcy. It could be a falling out with important people in your life. It could be a massive betrayal from someone or people close to you. It could be something outside of you, like a natural disaster or some other threat like that. Sometimes we experience these things collectively as well. And it can bring out everything. Right, just when you thought you had it all going for you. And it could feel like everything is wrong. And in one respect, it is, because you're certainly not where you're going to be in the end. But in another way, you are going through the valley of the process, the dark night on every level. And you have to go through it. And we'll talk a lot more about that in other episodes. You all know a lot about that already, I'm sure. So this has been an interesting detour of an episode. I hope that some things are starting to click. I also hope I'm continuing to give you some encouragement. That's more and more of a goal of the videos that I make. And I desire to get more and more specific and direct in coming videos, which will like tighten everything up as well, because I think right now we're doing like 20 to 25 minutes, and it's a bit fluffy still, and I could get a lot more like into the meat of things for you. That is an intention of mine as we keep going. So thank you again for watching, for listening. This is the Seeker's Reset. My name is Robert. Take care for now.